But anyway.
Leave those lights on. Floodlight check out which works best for you. Those on. Turn that one on. Let's see. How does that work? Probably good for viewing to you here. Got a little light.
I've got more light than I
You got more
need.
stuff on there than
No,
here?
but I've got a few notes.
Oh, okay.
That I just want to remind myself of.
So you gave the 1 minute warning there with the
Yep.
light, huh?
Yep.
So pretty much.
Okay.
I guess. Got one bite of cookie left.
One bite of cookie.
Well, let's finish that cookie there and then we'll get started.
Yeah. Inhale it.
All right, good afternoon, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started with our lunchtime seminar. And I'm going to give the honor of introducing our speaker, Mr. Peter Boice, to Dr. Pete Egan. And Pete and Peter have been working together for, I dare say, how many years? Ask.
21?
21 years. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Pete. And Peter, looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, good afternoon. There used to be three Petes. There was me, Peter Boice, and Peter had a fellow by the name of Pedro working for him. So we were the three Petes. At any rate, I've known Peter almost close to 50 years now, off and on as undergraduates. I recall bumping into him a few times at Syracuse. I majored in forestry, he didn't. I think that was his advantage. At any rate, we've worked together on a conservation committee for 21 years, as Captain Beavers noted, and we've had a good relationship trying to coordinate our respective programs, and it was thought by Captain Beaver this would be a good opportunity for Peter to give a bit of an outline of the natural resource program and how we, as pest managers, might better integrate with his program. I'll give you Mr. Boice.
Well, thank you, Pete, and I'd like to thank the board and Mark Beavers for giving me this opportunity. With today's travel budget, there's not many places I can go to talk about this program that I've worked with for over 25 years here at DoD. It's been my passion. I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of different issues, and I hope enable a lot of people through our funding program to go out and do good things and move our policies as well. So what I want to do today is to give you, start you off with the key issue that's facing natural resources managers right now, and there's probably ways in which that coordinates with the things that you do. And I thank you for. And from there, I want to focus on some of the things that our Natural Resources Policy Office does, and then move from there to an out in the field quick look at about a half dozen different types of projects that we've had a hand in helping get going, and just wrap up with a few thoughts on some of the new issues or issues that are new to us, where we're going to go with those, and hopefully leave time for questions and or a quick break for you before you get back to your sessions. So, before I turn to our current hot issue of candidate species, I want to leave you with one thought. If you remember nothing else from my presentation today. It's what natural resources is all about. It's about mission and it's about stewardship. We try and coordinate the two of those as much as possible. We need to ensure that we enable the mission folks, the war fighters, the testers, the trainers, to do their mission. We also take seriously our compliance requirements with all of the different federal laws, executive orders, and so forth. Our key issue right now is candidate species. Why candidate species? Species that, first of all, are ones that may warrant future protection under the Endangered Species Act. And what's key for us is to try to avoid critical habitat designation. It's one thing to have a species on your base listed. It's quite another thing to have the additional restrictions associated with specific parts of your base and what that might do to what you want to do, whether it be actually training in your training area or even something as simple as putting up a new building. Construction projects can get halted by some of the species as well. I remember going down to a base in Texas where there was a federally listed plant right there in front of the administration building. Fortunately, it grew well in a mowed environment in front of the base. But so there was no critical habitat designated there, but there could have been if it were a different sort of plant. So how do we avoid this for those species that are not yet listed? And there are plenty that are listed. There are 440-some species on our lands that are federally listed. And we've been able to, in most cases, do our mission with few restrictions on our mission. But we have those, and now we have others. We have, and I'll explain why in a second, why we have so many right now. But we can avoid designating critical habitat if we have an improved INRIP. And for those of you who don't know, that's an Integrated Natural Resources Management Plan. That plan includes components of many other parts of the base activities, including your pest management plans. We try and coordinate with all the other key offices, including our pest managers. So we need to have that plan. We need to have it approved by our stakeholders, our base commander, of course, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the regional office or the local office, and by the particular state Fish and Wildlife Agency. Not only do we need to have the plan, well, might just go to plan if we don't actually implement it. So we try and sit down with those stakeholders on a regular basis, hopefully every year, to figure out what needs to be done. And in this specific case, we need to figure out what needs to be done with keeping those candidate species from being listed, or if they're going to be listed, how to avoid critical habitat designation. So avoidance requires advanced planning, coordination, and proactive actions on our part and on that part of our stakeholders as well. And I might add that on our part, it's our natural resources managers, but we also need to have proactive actions on the part of our other internal stakeholders, the mission folks, pest management people, our base master planner. So why so many now? Well, the Fish and Wildlife Service, for lack of resources, maybe at some points lack of political will, accumulated a long list of species that were eligible for listing. They met all the criteria probably, but they weren't moving forward. Eventually, a couple of non-governmental organizations sued the service for what turned out to be, at that point, over 750 species. Now, there were two lists there. There were about 250 that were ones that had a pretty long record. Some of them had been on the candidate list, but didn't have funds to move forward for as many as 20 years. And then there were all these others, over 500, that large part were plants or others for which were being discovered in the intervening time. So the court settlement separated those that had been waiting the longest, in some cases very critical needs to get greater protection, from the others. And they agreed, the Fish and Wildlife Service did, to moving forward with decisions on all of those 251 species over a course of a 6-year period. They have a timeline in place. With only a couple of exceptions, they've met that timeline. And figure out, divide 250 by 6, and you get the rough number of species that they're making these decisions on each year. And not unexpectedly, they've wound up with most of those species being considered ones that need to move forward and be listed. And they've done that now for about 80 species as of last count. Well, when this word of the settlement first came out, our political boss at the time, Dr. Dorothy Robine, our Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, saw the article in the Washington Post that day, and had a couple of other folks see the same article in the New York Times. So I come in Monday morning and I'm asked, okay, Peter, what are you going to do to keep these species from impacting our mission activities? Oh, okay, well, first of all, we need to find out how many of these 251 were on our bases, and what was the potential impact of all these species. Well, that took a data call. It wound up actually taking 2 eventually, an informal one and then a more formal one. And you probably know how much the military services love to get data calls from OSD. They actually did come through and gave us some pretty startling numbers in terms of how many of those 251 were found on our lands. 110. Almost half of them were found on military lands. Now, the good news is that there were a much smaller number that were ones that they thought would have a significant impact, potentially, on our mission if they were listed. 8 in total. The Army, the service that uses our lands most vigorously, and there's a lot of installations, not all that surprisingly, came up with the greatest number with that potential for listing. And including the greater sage grouse, which is at the bottom of this picture, and you saw a butterfly a couple slides back. The Taylor's checker spots at Fort Joint Base Lewis McChord were among the ones that are in that red category. So that's a pretty small universe. You add in another 29 that have a moderate impact on mission, and you're getting a bigger problem, one that the services need to pay attention to. And there were a lot of others where the potential impact is probably going to be minimal, but they're kind of ones that you need to watch. If you're playing the stock market, it's those that you watch to see if you've got to go up or down in terms of buying or selling. But you've got almost 40 that you certainly need to pay attention to, and another 70 that we do need to track. So by the time we got these results, Dr. Robine had moved on. John Conger is now our acting DoD for Installations and Environment. He wanted to know, okay, you've got all these species. Services, how are you doing in terms of addressing these in your NREMS? Not all that well. Not quite 50% of that combination of installations and species were, as of just about a year ago, adequately addressed by the service's own definitions within their NREMS. So we sent out a follow-up memo asking them to give us an update on these numbers when they come in early next calendar year to give us what we call our annual environmental management report review. So we're going to find new numbers next year. We hope that they will be much improved. I expect they will need to be reporting to Mr. Conger why not if that hasn't happened. But the key here is that we were proactive in identifying where the potential concerns were, and the services have stepped up quite vigorously. They understand we've had enough other species that have had the potential to have critical habitat designated to know that this is something that warranted additional resources. Additional dollars to implement projects in some cases, to monitor, in some cases just to find out whether those species were on their lands or not. So if I had to guess, I would guess that we would show pretty good success when we get these numbers back to us in a couple months. I'll follow through with the board and let them know so we can pass that word out to all of you. It should be an interesting story. But we're not done. We will provide some ongoing next steps. So we will continue to track the listings and the results of these studies. We will be coordinating with the Fish and Wildlife Service about that other universe of over 500. What's their plans to do those? Right now it's on the back burner, but geez, we're almost halfway through that 6-year period since the court settlement came out, so we need to pay attention to those. One key thing is that we don't want to overreact. We want to be able to do those things that we need to do to keep the impact of potential listings down. But we have found from a couple of painful cases in the past that sometimes an individual installation would commit to doing a lot of work just so they could move forward with a particular project. We feel, in retrospect, that it was perhaps committing to too much, that we could have worked with other partners, but it was time sensitive. So we are trying to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service, with all of the military services, to reduce those mitigation measures costs where possible. Another thing that has come up, and we're trying to work with our Energy Siting Clearinghouse, is that with all this push for alternative energy, there is the potential for decisions that might be good for producing energy, but they might cause inadvertent consequences elsewhere, including on species and habitat, and unwittingly on military requirements, because we have in the Southwest in particular, where you've got solar energy and also some wind power possibilities to have that sort of negative impact. So we're trying to identify where we need to weigh in there, not just for the mission impacts that they might have, and I think there's been enough in the news that you might be aware of how in some cases the wind turbines can affect radar. Solar arrays potentially have the impact to blind pilots if they're in the flight path heading into an airport such as out in Nevada. So we're going to be looking at that. We'll also be evaluating the impacts of other natural resources laws and regulations, including the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and others, on these candidate species. Bottom line is that we've been pretty successful since we first had the provision added in legislation, one that we sought for, in which some of the the NGOs fought against back in the FY03, FY04 time period. They didn't think that we'd be able to move forward as smartly as we did. But we got this provision, and I think that with a push on getting our INRIMS in place and actions taken, that as the chart shows, we had a surge back in 04 and 05 in terms of avoiding critical habitat. 51 installations and satellite parts have used the INRIM exclusion successfully since then. We don't have the numbers for FY13 yet. FY12, I wasn't technologically savvy enough to put that on here, but that's another 5 for the last year there. But I expect there will be a big spike in FY13 in terms of successfully avoiding critical habitat designation associated with the whole list of species that I just have been talking about for this time. So, from that specific example of the key thing that we do, what do we do? What do we do as a natural resources program? And right now I'll be talking about our Office of the Secretary of Defense office, and that really means me. It means my colleague Allison Dulcimer, who some of you know, who is providing support through the Center for Environmental Management for Military Lands, and it's a minor amount of logistical support from some other contractors. We provide policy and guidance. We oversee our components programs, including, as we have with the candidate species issue. We try and identify, define needs, and address those gaps, either with our own funds or by working with the military services. And we try and do as much outreach and expand our partnerships as much as we can. So I'd like to talk about each of these for a bit. Policy and guidance. I love working this area. It's not for everyone, but it's needed. It's needed to make sure that we translate those federal regulations, executive orders, other requirements from the military testers and trainers into good stuff, that we are able to meet those requirements, we're able to save money. We've done that. I've listed the 4 key documents that I think are the cornerstone of that policy and guidance. We add policy memos that are only good for a certain amount of time for a while, and there's other such things, but these are the key, and I'll talk about each of those a bit more. The 4715.03 instruction, that's our Bible for our natural resources policies in DoD. All of the military services have implementing instructions that tie off and give more details than are in our instruction. But right up front, the first real language in the instruction defines these 4 key areas. I've talked before about integrated mission and stewardship. It's right there, the very first line of actual substance. We try to instill a conservation ethic among all of our military personnel, the families that live there. We try and reach out to others as well. We want sustained use of natural resources, not just for the environmental laws, but because it's good business. It's difficult to get additional lands to test and train on. We try and sustain those lands for all purposes. In some cases, we can use them for recreation and hunting, fishing, and such. In some cases, it's sustaining them for military purposes, to make sure there's as much flexibility as possible, which is more important as conditions are changing, it appears, on a pronounced increased rate than previously. And we try to identify opportunities for improved cooperation, internally and externally. Now, the manual, which is right now probably about this far from being formalized and signed by the Undersecretary, it was in their admin office when I last checked yesterday, that provides more details beyond what we could put into the instruction itself. It includes one really key thing, and that is that we're providing for streamlined procedures for reviewing our INRIMS on an annual and on a 5-year basis. And that we can, when it comes to that 5-year period and we're looking for what do we need to do with this document, do we get by with updating it, or do we need a full revision? We're trying to move people away from what for quite a period was okay, we need to revise this and spend a lot of money just on developing a new plan. We feel that's only needed when there have been significant changes in the conditions on an installation, whether it be a new mission, whether it be a whole new array of listed or candidate species on your installation, major change in the conditions of the resources, the habitat, then you need to spend the dollars to put together a new fully revised plan. But in the great majority of plans, we feel that we can get by with updating specific sections. Fish and Wildlife Service and the states have signed off on that. We've put this not only into our manual, which is about to go final, the Fish and Wildlife Service has put it into their guidance as well, which they'll be putting into a surname process this month to get that issued as formal policy. And beyond that, we've put it into the Sykes tripartite MOU, which we just updated in late July, which has already been signed by all 3 parties. That already specifies the revision versus update and how to otherwise facilitate quicker review of these plans. And our manual, their guidance, will just amplify and reemphasize that. If you're interested, that's where you can find that document. We're doing the same thing for migratory birds. We spend about half of all the dollars that we spend on federally listed species are spent on birds. You're probably aware of some of the big names: the red-cockaded woodpecker, the San Clemente Island loggerhead shrike, the black-capped very own beaked warbler down in Texas is just a couple examples where we've spent millions or tens of millions of dollars on each of these. And because birds move more than any of the other species that we have responsibilities for, they create a more complex set of patterns, and that's why we're trying to, and also because we're required now by federal executive order, we are updating the current existing migratory bird MOU that expired a couple of months ago. There's some cases where there was language in the original MOU where changing conditions dictate that we've pretty much told the Fish and Wildlife Service we can't do this anymore. There's other cases where we're trying to address new and emerging threats, including some of the ones that I've mentioned. That right now is just going into formal coordination, so I expect that it'll be sometime early next year before we see that. That will complement our other formal issuances and the Sykes MOU. What else do? We oversee our natural resources programs. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but the key thing I think is that the metrics are explicitly tied to the IMRIMS. And that's the kind of questions that we ask of the military services when they report. So we want to evaluate the effectiveness of our natural resources support to the mission, assess the overall health and trends of those resources, and identify potential shortfalls in funding and other resource shortfalls. This is what we came up with. I've been asked since roughly 1994 to develop some sort of metrics to identify the health of the natural resources program. I can recall that we in the services struggled for years to come up with something that met the needs of our leadership. But we had a couple of false starts. But a few years back, we agreed taking something that the Navy had implemented first and expanding it to all of the military services. We looked at 7 focus areas and have identified, defined all of those, and in a couple-step process, we've been able to, first of all, get consistency in how all of the services define these 7 terms, and then just this year we've improve the consistency on how they define the green, yellow, red. And we look for trends in these. We look for where the key problem areas are. I've been through now 3 different reviews where John Conger has sat in with each of the military services reviews. What we can get is not only this DoD summary, but each of the military services comes in, presents a chart of their current metrics, and it gets to the point where there's not so many, fortunately, installations that are identified as red, where Mr. Conger will sit down with the Deputy Assistant Secretary for each of the services, or people that are making the presentations, and find out, okay, I see you've got 2 red installations for interim project implementation. What are they? What's the problems? And that's the kind of detail that we expect the services to provide for those areas that have a clear threat to our mission and to our stewardship responsibilities. So it's been an evolving process, but the leadership likes it. It's a clear snapshot for each service and for all of DoD, and it can just very much with these graphs also just show the trends in, for example, in project implementation. We've had quite a lot of improvement, as you can see by the decrease in the red and to a smaller degree in the yellow over the years. Third thing we do in our office, we try to define our needs and address our gaps. In terms of defining needs, it's some planning and it's developing frameworks. So we've had a draft document for our office, and what I and Allison, with support from military services, are going to do in place for about 3 years. It's an ongoing living document. We've never actually gone out and to publish it formally because things do change quite quickly. We found it as a useful document to present to our leadership as to what our current work plan is for the next year, and that's what we will continue to do. I'm right now trying to finalize that to present to my immediate supervisor, Maureen Sullivan, who's the director of ESOH, sometime within the next couple of weeks. And we have a couple of plans specific to areas where we've got groups of representatives who have been formed around two big initiatives that offer the potential for greater partnerships, greater degree of technical sharing. And that's, again, BIRDS with the DoD Partners in Flight plan, which is now out for formal review with the military services. And similarly for the herps, the amphibians and reptiles, we are developing a similar plan to identify what it is that our national and technical representatives can do, what are the needs of the mission, and to provide these to the military services so that they know who to go to when there's a need for this kind of information that is outside of their own chain, their own stovepipe. So those are ongoing and the sort of things that we need to continue to do to identify where our gaps are. The other thing we do here is we try and do a lot of outreach in terms of tools and training. I've listed a couple of the key tools here that are found online. Biodiversity, that was a really big topic back 12, 15 years ago when there was less awareness of the elements of biodiversity. We've developed a full web for our bird conservation issues, and we have Chris Eberly, who is our national representative for those bird issues. And working with the board, specifically with Pete Egan here, we've developed a number of invasive species outreach tools that are available for all of you, and we've also got them where they're out there for the public domain for anyone else who wants to have access to these, including a series of posters. We, a few years back, were able to offer 4, 5, 6 offerings of 3 different courses that we developed specific for DoD needs. There's a lot of off-the-shelf training for technical issues of natural resources compliance where we don't need to provide something different. If you want to know how to pull a weed or apply pesticides, maybe there's things that the board needs to do, but in terms of full training courses, that's outside of our purview. And for something like how to manage forests, longleaf pine forest requirements for DoD are pretty much the same as they are outside of DoD lands. But where there are differences, first of all, the Sykes Act, which is our enabling legislation. It's specific to DoD. It lays out all the requirements that we need to consider that are specific to DoD natural resources. They're quite distinct. There's nothing else out there, so we developed 2 courses that were related to Sykes Act and Endangered Species Act. There's enough different in how we manage some of the details of ESA, some of the focus areas that we want to make sure all of our on-the-ground natural resources managers and others need to be aware of, that we did develop these courses. And we took them out, traveling roadshow, offered them to between 35, 40, 45 folks around the country. As I mentioned, about 20 offerings total. Well, you know, all know what's happened with training dollars and with travel dollars. It's just not there right now to continue doing it that way. But we have all of the hard copy materials posted online. Most of it is still up to date and is accessible for use. But what we just are going to be implementing, probably starting in January, is taking one of those courses, and I've decided that the ESA course is the one that is changing the most. That we will be able to develop that into a web-based type of course. I'm not quite sure yet just what the details of it will be. It'll be based on the existing ESA course that we have online now. So expect that within a year or so that we will be able to provide that webinar on an ongoing basis. Now, besides that, we provide information on all of those workshops and on a whole series of others that we held in conjunction with the Fish and Wildlife Service and with some of the state agencies, about 24 of the different states, identifying particular needs related to 5 different regions around the country. We focused on Chesapeake Bay and on the Southwest and the Southeast and up in the Northeast. And we identified a lot of projects through those workshops, many of which, about 25 projects of which we funded through the Legacy program, roughly during the period 2005 to 2010. All that information from those workshops is also online. I wanted to mention, I know you've got some own funding sources within pest management community. We have a number within natural resources. Certainly with a couple of these, we've reached out when there has seemed to be a good fit to your folks and to others to try to identify projects that can help all of us. The reserve account, we have commercial forestry on some of our bases. Bases such as Fort Stewart and Joint Base Lewis McChord have in most years, the largest programs in terms of both gross and net income. But there are a number of other installations that still offer these programs where it still makes sense, both economically and in a lot of cases for mission support reasons, to offer them. And let me digress just a second. For mission purposes, well, yes, we find that a base like Bragg or other longleaf focused bases can go out and they can do training in the longleaf if it's cleared properly, if there's proper line of sight, if there's a reduction of the understory. So our foresters will work with those folks to try to identify where you can best harvest marketable timber for both getting a bit of extra money and for helping the mission. So it's a program that in a normal year provides anywhere between $1 million and $2 million in net proceeds that are then routinely sent back to those installations that have the forestry programs. In a few cases, we've reached beyond that for other projects that we can't otherwise fund, but that's mostly a self-contained program. The Legacy program has been in existence for over 20 years now. It's had the great bulk of its funding in the first 5 years. Right now we have a President's budget line item of about $5.4 million, and as last year we expect probably a 20% cut, so we're looking at just over $4 million. Well, that is still a good deal of money and an opportunity to do a lot of good. So last year we funded about 40 projects. It's natural and cultural resources projects. We expect about the same this year. We're in the review period right now for the projects for this year, and we'll be getting those results out in January. And then a few of the other projects that are there. Partners in Outreach, you can read why we partner, but I'll move through this a bit quickly because I want to get to some of those specific examples. The National Military Fish and Wildlife Association, I do want to call them out as being a dedicated core group of natural resources managers who've been holding these national meetings since 1983. Now, this is another thing where the loss of travel dollars is threatening their ability to provide this essential in-person training. They held a small meeting last year in D.C. About 40 people were able to attend. Normally in D.C. we get about 200, so you can see the impact that this is having on our being able to reach out to our managers. So more webinars and other types of training are in the future for them as well. We've used the Cooperative Ecosystem Studies units very effectively as a means of reducing overhead for projects and, in some cases, coordinating projects across different agencies. We are now a member of all 17 of these units. You can see the figures just for this past year in terms of how much we estimate we've saved in overhead from having this 17.5% cap. It's not for everyone. Fort Worth District does the majority of it for us. I know that the Navy has other means of getting cooperative agreements signed through ESU where they don't need to go through Fort Worth. But it's an option out there that there may be some cases where you've got projects that you could use this for as well. It's pretty broad. It's mostly natural. There's some cultural resources projects as well. We partner with a lot of NGOs. These are just some of the examples of ones that we partner with successfully over the years, and more information is available for all of those. I will point out just about a year and a half ago, we finished the first project, this set of a couple of videos where we had the actor, Ed Norton, narrated this information as a means to avoid our troops, as when they were coming back from overseas, of inadvertently bringing back illegal wildlife parts, hides, goods, and such. We found from doing surveys at a couple of installations, including Fort Drum, that there was a sad lack of awareness, which had caught a number of our uniformed people up, and including at least one Army colonel who was caught trying to inadvertently bring back a pretty significant animal pelt. So we want to try and avoid that through that awareness. And the other examples there. We work not only on the national level, but on the regional level through these partnerships. I worked with Pete to help develop a whole series of these SISMAs down in Florida. We eventually covered all parts of the state where military installations were involved, and came up with some good projects for each of those regions. That was one of the more successful regional projects that we've done that have had an invasives component to it. And we also do a number of more locally implemented partnerships. The one where there's some opportunity for your folks in particular might be with National Public Lands Day. This year we funded 30 projects around the country, and some of them do involve pulling weeds and otherwise improving habitat. So those are small grants. Those are $6,500 or less, but we've been able to make some good inroads. A lot of installations that otherwise don't easily get access to funds for nice-to-do projects. And I wanted to put this up here just to show you that we do try and focus on outreach through our websites. We have a quarterly newsletter. Next one, after a bit of a low because of contracting issues, will be coming out in December. And I can make sure that we get that sent off to everyone that Captain Beavers wants to have on his distribution. And a number of other means. If you tweet, we've got a Twitter account that's at the bottom as well. And I expect that by the end of the day there will be a tweet there that tells our readership, which is now over 1,000 folks, that I just spoke to your group. So we're trying to keep that up to date. Some real-world examples. I couldn't have a talk without talking about invasive species control. I think that you can probably understand the different impacts to DoD and, that are related to invasives, mission, ecological, health and safety. I don't think I need to get into that any further to this group, but just call out a few examples. The legacy program working with USDA started working on the brown tree snake back in the early 1990s. Because we were working with another federal agency, we kept getting these fits and starts we could only fund in a fiscal year. That slowed that down a bit, but we did a number of projects were related to testing different fumigants and toxicants and repellents, and I think we've made some inroads there. Pete's been out to Guam probably more times than he cares to count, so he could probably tell you more about that than I can, but that was one effort. We also worked to put together with the Vicksburg lab of the Army a book on how to deal with cleaning the vehicles as they were coming back from overseas deployment, and how to do that properly. So Al Francesco and others down at Vicksburg helped with that. And to reach out to the general audience, we've put together a commander's guide on invasive species and other such. These are just some of the invasives that are of concern to us. Red fire ant comes to mind as one. A whole bunch of other invasive weeds out west. Some of those are very flammable, and we need to be concerned as to how to avoid wildfires, which are becoming an increasing problem out in the southwest part of the country. We're also interested in diseases. In this particular case, amphibian diseases. We didn't fund this project just because of the title, but this was the title that came into our legacy program office, and it was one of the more amusing that we've ever funded. But the bottom line was that we were trying to find out, is chytrid impacting our installations? A fifth of the world's amphibians face extinction, and chytrid has been a major factor in the decline of many species. So the first phase of this study was focused along installations pretty much close to, within 100 miles or so, of Route 66. We did 15 then. We did 3 other transects a couple years later that were on a north-south basis. And we've got a much better understanding now of where chytrid is present on our installations, sadly on the majority of them, and where it isn't. What we've also done is a follow-up. Dr. Rob Lovich out Navy Southwest and Chris Peterson here in the Norfolk area, also NAVFAC, have developed a means for our installation biologists to do a swab kit so that they can, on their own installations, test their amphibians to see if they've got this chytrid as well, and hopefully be able to take some measures to reduce its impact. Another disease issue that we've been focusing on that I don't have a slide for, of course, is related to bats and white nose syndrome. That's another major issue, and a couple of species that we thought were going to be on the verge of downlisting or delisting are sadly now very, very much in decline. What else do we do? Relating to mission, we help monitor to prevent BASH, Bird Animal Aircraft Strike Hazard. I know that the Natural Resources Committee tomorrow will be having a presentation from Mike Beecher that will go into that in some more detail, and I'll be calling in to provide our input to that group as well. But among the studies that we've done on BASH has been this fairly recent one out of Langley Air Force Base that also provided input to another 6 installations. Where are the ospreys in this particular case? But using satellite biotelemetry and geospatial referencing to quantify what their movements were. We were able to map the locations of half dozen ospreys around these bases, especially around Langley, to demonstrate where in the relationship to the flight paths these birds were known to be flying and at what times of day. With this information, our installation manager at Langley was able to move several of the osprey nests out of that flight path, reducing the potential flight hazards caused by BASH. And we've done a number of other studies. We've worked with Clemson on bird radar to identify the potential impacts of large clusters of smaller birds. And although the potential for severe damage to a plane is probably less with the smaller birds, you get a whole flock of them, and suddenly that potential is magnified significantly. The bottom line is, birds don't want us flying into them any more than we want them to fly into us. So we're just trying to work to minimize that damage. And part of being able to know how to do that is just where are the birds and when are they there. Habitat improvement, we've been working with longleaf pine because of the red cockaded woodpecker. These are poor lands for most purposes except for growing longleaf pine, growing woodpeckers, and growing about another half dozen federally listed species. They're high quality for them. Back during World War II, as that was ramping up, it was also areas that were relatively easily given up for military lands when there was a need for lands in the southeast. Okay, here's our poor lands on the sandy soil. So how do we, given that these are now major bases for us, Fort Bragg, Stewart, Benning, and others, Eglin Air Force Base, so over in the Panhandle of Florida, how do we manage so that we can reduce the restrictions imposed by these birds, as we now successfully have at both Fort Bragg and Fort Stewart? Now, among the actions that our natural resources managers undertake are prescribed burning, replanting, and with our REPI office, we're working with off-base partnering to increase the amount of longleaf pine acreage off-site. The long-term thought here is that eventually we hope we can get enough population of those birds off-site that we can phase back on the number of them on base, giving us greater flexibility as to where we can test and train. We also work with marine mammals. A lot of our work has been done with manatees, and northern white whales has been another issue. But with the manatees, they're declining in population. They're the cutest, ugly animals I can think of that I've personally seen. But they can't detect or locate approaching watercraft. So working with a contractor who's done a lot of work on sound perception and acoustical information, we identified that this was a problem, and Ed Gerstein, the contractor involved, developed a prototype mechanism to alert manatees of the slow-moving boats. I've seen the videos associated with that, and they seem to be very effective in terms of moving the manatees out of the path of our boats. This is one case where there is another issue. That is that it's a federally listed species, and the Fish and Wildlife Service has thus far felt that, okay, we'll let you test this procedure, which they did. First step, successful, but then, this noise is now being considered a harassment of the manatees, which is something that's against the ESA. So it's become difficult for us to take that next step to actually put these devices on our operational vehicles in the area around Naval Sub Base Kings Bay or some of the bases down in Florida. So that's where we're at right now, a successful test in terms of, okay, manatees respond amazingly fast for these slow-moving mammals that they are, but where we have not yet gotten to implementing phase. We monitor for at-risk species. I love owls. Western burrowing owl is a cute little critter that is on the state-protected list in a number of the western states, as well as in Canada. We conducted a 5-year study, legacy dollars, partnered with Canada, Mexico, and a whole bunch of other folks to determine the migratory linkages across those, the entire region, with information feeding into specific installations in RIMS. One reason this is important, tying the mission, is that these birds often locate in the low vegetation that's right adjacent to our airfields. Again, another potential bash issue. So we want to find out what their habits were, maybe be able to move these birds away from the airfields as well. This, I'm happy to say, was so well viewed by the President's Council for Migratory Birds that DoD was selected as the winner of their award last April. So it got a whole lot of deserved good PR and good results. I want to call out in particular our managers down at Kirtland Air Force Base as being instrumental in setting up this entire project. Species at risk protection. I talked about species risk, county species, right at the start of my talk. I just had to show a picture of the acute scene Nicholas Island Fox, and that we do automated monitoring technique to try and identify the threats to this population. Again, this is all about avoiding listing, avoiding critical habitat, and by using these automated techniques, we try and minimize our monitoring costs, and we've proven successfully this is a technique that can be used for mammals such as the fox for use at other of our installations and used in a cost-effective basis. Groundwater protection, we don't do a lot of that within natural resources, but we do some, especially when it's related to our species or our lands. And this is one project that we did a couple of years back around San Pedro, Fort Huachuca area, where there are critical water supply issues, and where we try to determine the extent and future availability of both surface and groundwater, and better predict the impact of those withdrawals on the species and relatedly on Huachuca's ability to perform its mission. Just as a quick sidebar here, my boss, Maureen Sullivan, has mentioned a number of times, and first time in public back at the last time we had a Sustainable Military Range Conference about 3 years ago, that she feels that water is the next oil. And what she means by that is that it's going to become critical. It is critical already in large parts of the world. It's something that I know our strategic military folks have spent a lot of time trying to identify what the threat is to national and international security related to water. It's also an issue right here in this country. And I want to close by just talking about one other way that we partner with Mission, and this is an operation that started before I started in my job in OSD, so it goes way back, right, Pete? Mud Ops exercise out at what used to be Marine Corps Base Kaneohe Bay, now Hawaii, conducted since 1982. A pretty simple concept. They used the AAVs to every late January, early February, go around and kill the invasive pickleweed and create moats, islands of terrain where the endangered Hawaiian stilt could safely nest. What this did was, by creating these water channels, was to keep predators away from the bird. And it's caused a significant increase in the population of those birds over time, and it allowed young Marines, in this case, to be able to operate those AAVs out there in an area that they apparently had a lot of fun doing. I never had a chance to view the operation, but I saw some of the video, and they seemed to really enjoy doing that. And I wanted to close by just saying that our natural resources community lost a very valuable member of the team just about a month and a half ago. Dr. Diane Driggett, who is a personal friend of mine, worked at Kaneohe Bay for about 30 years. She was one of the most enthusiastic, dedicated people that I've ever known. She was responsible for working with the Marines, for letting them know that a small woman biologist knew what the military needed, was able to figure out how to work with them, how to work with the community, how to integrate natural and cultural resources. A model program on many respects. So I just want to acknowledge that I miss Diane, and I think that many of my colleagues do as well. So I probably have left time for 2 questions, but
a couple of questions. Anybody have any?
Yes, sir.
How does your policy impact overseas operation environment? You know, we go into a theater, we have an integrated test management plan, oftentimes maybe theater-wide, not necessarily based specific to theater-wide. But in growing focus on this area, how is that going to be incorporated into those operational environments?
It's different overseas. Everything I've talked about is pretty much specific to our bases in the States as well as our territories. So we've got the status of force agreements in place. In general, we try to comply with all of the laws of the particular host nation. We don't, in any of the policies that come out of natural resources, address overseas specifically. There is another part of the office that has charge of what's called the Overseas Environmental Baseline Guidance Document, and that talks about all of the environmental suite of rules and regulations, including, I believe it's a chapter on natural resources.
Anybody else? All right, before we move on, Peter, if you come forward here, we'd like to give representatives an additional Armed Forces Pest Management Board coin.
Oh,
And this is number 148, so congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, everybody. And then as we get ready to break the rooms back apart for our next sessions, if anybody has to come up and see Peter and have some client questions, feel free.
Absolutely. I'll be around as long as there are questions.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, I'll catch you again tomorrow afternoon.
Yep.
Thank you. Don't put that up on eBay.
Well, I won't have the 148 show.
Hey, we always appreciate your help in all those projects and working together. Great partner over the years. So, yeah.
Work together pretty well on
Well, thank you, sir.
many different
Nice
things.
time.
Thank you.
I like
Yeah.
it.
All right.
Peter, I'm Mac Graham. I work with
There, yeah.
Kevin Portek.
Oh,
Dan Reeves. I'm with that group there.
all right.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
PI species
Uh-huh.
in our in-ramps, T&E, do they drive the same funding requirement that a listed species drives? I'm getting a lot of pushback from the bases. You know, we've gone under that AFCEC concept.
Yes.
So the bases are coming back and saying, well, hey, when I was Space Command, our candidate species were the same drive as a listed species, so I want to score that as a 24, and it's a must fund. What's your position on that?
We do have to allow the services some discretion in how they